I'm Megan.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Erika.
And this is the Her Podcast.
Today we're sitting down with local content creator, serial entrepreneur, me. Okay, what actually happened, guys, is we had to pivot on an episode and we quickly threw together this solo one, which actually came out pretty decent. That's kind of the magic when you don't really prep for anything. I share all about finding my identity today through being a farm wife, a mom, an entrepreneur, finding my voice. This is a throwback to the first episode I actually did on the Her Podcast way back in the dusty archives of 2019. I shared my journey of being a farm wife and how much I resisted it in the beginning. Obviously, life happens, and I'm definitely in another season of figuring out my place with the farm, my business, and my family. I won't lie, I get super raw and open in this one, so I hope you guys enjoy it. You know, it's always you.
It's always me.
It's always you doing this in the episodes, and I'm always like, stop.
It's me. And then I'm also drinking my coffee. Am
It's
I
like,
loud enough? Erika
which is hilarious because
I love you and I need you to turn your head when you drink your coffee.
But it's funny because you're the quietest talker.
Oh.
So you're literally like,
But the loudest.
Like, I'm like a raccoon.
you're so like loud in every other area, and I'm like, I need you to bring that energy to your voice.
Do you know what's so funny? Andrew would be like, calls me like Stomps McGee upstairs because I just stomp around. Like I walk heavy.
Oh my goodness.
I trip all over the place. I'm very clumsy. So I'm loud. But then I'm just
not
like,
in the way that you
friends.
anticipate.
Have you seen, there's like this TikTok going around, and it's like probably a husband and wife, and he's slamming all of her makeup like this, like slamming it and slamming. And then it cuts to them being outside at the car, and she's like shutting the door so quietly. Cause like I notoriously like slam the car door, and he's like, why? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm making sure it's shut.
What do you mean? I'm just shutting the door.
You
want to make sure it's shut, right? Mm-hmm. I saw it was actually Alicia McCarville did a Instagram reel about inspired by this couple that does this hilarious whenever they're in an argument, they get real close to each other and they like whisper talk fight, and then he'll get like right up close to her and he's like, you didn't do the thing you said you're gonna do, and then she talks to her, she's like, well, you forgot. And it's so funny because then obviously you're both pissed at each other, but then you have like a whisper fight in each other's faces, and it's funny, but it's so funny to watch.
Oh my gosh.
Well, they say if you can bring humor to fights, that's a great way to diffuse it.
That's how we should do it next time we have to have hard conversations. And you guys just get right up in my face and be like, Megan.
But I think that was actually, though, I think I heard it on Ed Milet's pod. I think it was him on his podcast.
Daddy Ed.
He was talking about, I don't know, like how to have a good relationship. And he was like talking about his wife. And he's like, if you're ever in an argument with your spouse, touch them. Like grab their hand. He's like, because that connection will diffuse. Like when you can be like, he's like, you know, too often you're like standing across the room and you're facing off. He's like, get close.
Arms crossed.
Like, he's like, just for a second, like touch each other and just be like, okay, like we are actually in this together. And I don't think Nick would come within 10 feet of me. He'd be like,
you're like, Nick, come here. And he's like farther and farther away.
I definitely try and hold Ben's hand.
I think I unconsciously like,
yeah. I'll like
I'm not holding
hands,
but
I'm like, no, I'm just kidding.
Erika's like,
I'm like, oh, trust me, there's physical contact.
There's contact
no, I'm
that
kidding.
happens. I'm really excited today. We have like last minute put this together, but we are going to talk about something that actually Erika started, if you guys don't know, the Her Podcast with originally was Erika's podcast, and she talked about being a farm wife and her life and these different types of things. And so today we thought that this would actually be like a really great topic to bring up and to throw back to, because you guys resonated, those who did listen to that episode, with it so much. And even her content on social, when she talks about it, gets a lot of engagement from women. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is a very important topic, and I love hearing Erika's perspective and just like journey and experience on it. So today we're chatting all things like farming, hashtag why you're not the average farm wife.
Yeah.
And what that means to you.
Yeah. And I think also, like, if you're not a farmer and you're not in the farming community, you'll get something from this as well. I'd say it's more like almost this episode's a little bit about like forced identity.
Great.
Is what I would say. And I will share a little bit. There's been zero prep for this episode. Zero prep. I was like, I could revamp this first episode I ever did. So the backstory is the Her podcast actually launched in 2019 with me like solo sitting in my like lash room, because I was a lash artist, like on my phone, like just recording.
I forgot you were a lash artist.
Yes. And the reason I thought of the podcast was because I went to make a post about this and I had so much to say. And I was like, I don't want to write this out. I just want to say it. And then I was like, I should record it. And then of course I was like, podcast. And if you know the stats, people only get past 6, typically don't get past 6 episodes on podcasts. And that is exactly what happened to me. And then now it's here again and it's revamped, which is great. But I think, like, honestly, we're going to be going into harvest in August. So it's actually like very close. And I just realized that right now.
I
We're in
think
July
there's a
right now.
misconception that for people who are not in the
Yes.
farming community, that harvest is like October.
Yes, that's like when harvest is over.
Right.
Right. I had someone once, bless their heart, we got a ton of rain in September and they were like, you guys must be loving this. And I was like, this is the worst.
Yeah.
We don't want rain. We want it to be dry so we
Yeah.
can like use the combine. So I guess I'm just going to share my story. I'm just going to share kind of a little bit about Nick and I and kind of that dynamic.
Yeah, we'll jump in if we
Yeah.
Right? Just jump in. So the backstory is Nick and I grew up together. So I grew up in a farming community, but I was a townie and he was a little country bumpkin.
A townie.
I just made that up.
I
That's
love
not what we
it.
called ourselves.
Is this a young adult romance novel in the making?
It could be probably.
Here
Maybe
for it.
someday I'll share our whole story.
Do it.
Because whenever I do, people are like, okay, Nicholas Sparks.
Yes.
No, kidding. But basically what happened is I grew up in a farming community. So like very, not like involved in farming, but grew up knowing what it was. Nick and I were friends. Little history. We like liked each other in high school. So like our first kiss was in a grain truck actually when I went out to be with him during harvest. But never in a million years like did I think I was going to marry a farmer. Like that was never a thought in my head. I actually moved away from the town I grew up in when I was 16 and very much was like, I'm going to live in the city. I'm probably going to marry like a businessman or like a lawyer, like someone who worked like a 9 to 5, you know, have to like 2 kids. Like that's really what I thought for my life. But Nick and I have a very up and down relationship, and through the paths and decisions of life, we ended up getting together many years later. And, even then I think dating Nick, and we actually never dated. So when we were involved with each other, farming was always this like concept that I was like, oh, you farm and you're busy right now, but then you're like never, like all winter I would like have access to him.
Quick question. Did he start farming like immediately after graduation? Like was he
started farming at 16. He's been farming for 15 years, which we just figured out. And he was like,
Oh my goodness.
he's like, wait, and like did the math. And he's like, that's a really long time.
wow.
Yeah. So I think he bought his, like, I mean, when you're a farm kid, like he would have been in equipment at like 14.
Yes.
Probably younger, honestly.
As soon as they can help. They help.
Yes. So like, but I think he purchased his first bit of land maybe when he was like 17. Was like when he was like, yeah.
That's wild, though.
From his grandpa, actually. CJ's grandpa.
Oh, really?
Yep. So
Well, that makes sense.
when we were like together, and this, I think this like happens in any relationship. I mean, you always have like rose colored lenses. And so I remember being like, harvest, like farming is so romantic. Like I'm going to go out and sit in the combine. And
I
it's, like,
love how
so
you were like
cute.
a content creator before you were a content creator. You're like, this is going to be so cute. I love this aesthetic.
I was like, this is so sweet. Like his mom like brings us supper and we like sit here, and yeah, like his mom like would bring us supper and it'd be like so cute, but it'd be like one combine ride during harvest. And I had a life. Like I was like working and in school, like, you know what I mean? Like it never impacted me. His life never impacted me in that regard, other than I knew in winter I had full access to him. Like he was like always around. And so we ended up getting married, and very quickly after we got married, we were actually pregnant when we got married. And so very quickly, all the thoughts and dreams I had for my life, very quickly, like, I should back up a little bit. When Nick and I got reconnected finally, when we finally got it together, as some of our friends would say, I was living overseas. And when I came home from China, we like knew we were getting married. Like it was a very like, hey, I haven't seen you in 2 years, but we should probably do this. So I had all these dreams. I came home from China really feeling like I finally knew who I was after years of like school and working in random jobs. And then I came home and I was like, I know who I am. I have this amazing man. Like, he's going to farm and I'm going to become a paralegal and it's going to be this whole thing. And then we got pregnant and I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm going to be a mom for a while and that's okay. And that was great. But very quickly, I think I like very fast lost my identity really quick.
I think also motherhood does that.
It just does that in general. But then also coming off of like feeling like I was at the starting line of life and all of a sudden it was like pause. Like pause. Because I finally felt like I knew who I was. So I married a farmer. And I didn't even like, and this is the naive part of me, I didn't even like, because we never dated. Like, this is the back end. Like, we never dated. Like, I never went through seasons really with him in farming. Like, I just was like, oh, like, you combine for a few weeks and then like, great. So I never knew the impact. I never spent time with his family to understand like the farm stress. You know, we had Leslie Kelly on. Like, I never understood that farm stress, like what that would look like. So I married this guy, love him, would not change a thing. But I had no clue what I was getting into. Absolutely not. And what I really started to notice was this very quick, like, oh, so you're farmers, is what people would say to me. You guys are farmers. And I really struggled with that because I was like, I'm not a farmer like he is. But it was just the culture. It is just culture to say we're farmers. You're farmers.
Would your response be like, oh no, my husband's a farmer?
Not right away. I would say that I was kind of like, okay. And at that time, because I didn't really know what I was doing, who I was, I didn't really have like that strong sense of like who I was as a person. And I really felt, and I want to give a preface to say that like in-law relationships are very hard. They're very, like, there are just dynamics that are tough. We've come so far in our relationships. Like, we really, really have. But at the beginning, I would say it was really hard for me. I have in-laws who are extremely passionate about farm life, and they should be because they've done it their entire lives. But I felt that that passion was being pushed on me. And it was like farming. I remember the one day someone said to me, farming isn't a career, it's a lifestyle.
What did you think when you heard that?
I heard in my own head, no one said this to me. But I heard, like, fit the mold, get it through your head. This is your new life. That is what I heard. And I'm pretty like
sit down and shut up.
Like, sit down and shut. And I would like, my in-laws did not say that to me, but I perceived it.
Right.
I perceived. So when we moved to town, here's a little backstory. So my farmer husband, like, he has a farm. And when we first moved to town, I grew up in this town. I loved living in town as a kid. I got to like go to the park. I got to go see all my friends. I was like, why would I want to live in the country where my kids have to like rely on me for a ride, or we have no community, we have like no neighbors? Like, why would I want to do that? That sounds really isolating. So we played around with the idea. Nick has land very close to town. And this is like the story that comes from this is we were playing around with creating that land to be a farmyard. And we would live in town and have like a farmyard that he would go work at, and we just have like a really great shop, and that's where, you know, like
it's like 2 minutes
literally like you can see it from town. You can like stand on the outskirts of town and like see this land that we would have. And I remember when I told my in-laws that, and they were just like, what? Like, you can't do that. I think that was something that was said, was like, you can't do that. And that's when it was like, farming's a lifestyle. Like, you cannot do that. And I remember immediately my back was against the wall.
I was going to say, how did that like make you
react?
I
was extremely angry. And that flipped a switch in me that made me resent my husband's job. It made me resent just like the choice, like just realizing like how much I didn't understand was going to be like pushed on me. And so then like, and my husband's so supportive. I would like to say, like, Nick is so amazing. Like, never once was this his verbiage.
Right.
Ever.
It was your perception and how you were feeling.
And Nick never, like, Nick would have been like, okay, we can talk about like a farmyard. And we played around with that idea for a bit. Right. Like, he, I think, did actually a really good job of like going with me through my thought processes of being like, this is probably not a woman that I can be like, this is how it is. Like, I think he was probably like, I need to like, he's very partnership oriented, right? Yeah. Like, so, those conversations started to happen, and it was very difficult for me. It was very difficult. That's when people would say, you're farmers. I would say, he's a farmer. I am not, you know, and people would always joke about like when I was going to get in the tractor, when I was going to get in the combine. And I would always say, oh, you know, very playfully, but I'd be like, Nick knows the kind of wife he married. And he did. Like, he's never once been like, you're gonna have your skin in this game. Like it's fine. Right. And so I think I had this big identity problem where not only did I not know who I was because I was like a new mom, newly married, like we had Nate 4 months after we were married. Like it was really crazy. I now had all this like outside socially like constructed opinions on what farming looked like. And farming, while I love the technology and how far it's come, and it is very cool to see like what they can do now and just like different practices, I think the culture has not come that far from. And I think Leslie Kelly would even say, like, even with the mental health stuff, right? So and this is just my opinion. I know I'm going to have friends who are like, I don't agree with that, but I'm like, not one time was someone like, hey, Erika, so during harvest, we cook for the guys and take them supper. Would you like to do that? It's like, this is what we do.
So when you say the culture hasn't changed, can you just expand on that a little?
I think there is still, I think we're getting there, but I think there's still a very old school culture for a reason, and I'll get into that. But it's like you marry a farmer and you're a farmer and you do what the farm needs, regardless of your life. So let's put it into perspective. I'm basically almost working 2 full-time jobs right now.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to cook for supper for harvest?
You.
It's going to be me, unless I get bougie enough and outsource it, which people do. And I applaud them when they're like, that doesn't work for me. But I think what's been really hard for me is the expectation without asking. And here's the deal. I'm a pretty generous person with my time, but I like to be asked.
Yes.
I don't like to be told.
Hey guys, Megan here. Something I have been focusing on is truly feeling good in my body. And so one of the things I started doing is seeing a physiotherapist to strengthen and heal my body from pregnancy, giving birth, and the years I have spent doing physical work for my business. I started seeing Kim Frazier, owner of Still Physio, last year, and I have to tell you how incredible she is. Kim is extremely passionate about her work and helping her clients feel the best in their bodies. She is super knowledgeable and intentional in setting you up for success. She recently launched an online platform, Still Physio Education, offering courses to support you long-term and in between appointments. I just started the Deep Inner Core and Pelvic Floor series, and I noticed changes immediately. It takes you through 6 sections and 2 bonus sections, focusing on building a strong, sustainable, deep inner core to prevent injury and learn to trust your body. Each video is less than 40 minutes, which I found pretty easy to fit into my day, and I cannot tell you how good I felt after, especially stretching out and releasing my hips, because you know, as women, we tend to hold so much stress and energy in our hips. I highly encourage you to head to stillphysio.ca to sign up for Still Physio Education. Like I shared, I am working through the Deep Inner Core and Pelvic Floor series, but Kim also offers a 4-week breathwork series, which I will be starting ASAP, an 8-week Learn to Run 5K series, and more. Connect with Kim and follow Still Physio on Instagram at Still Physio. That's STILLPHYSIO. And if you haven't listened to episode 39 of the Her podcast yet, download it now. We had a super informative conversation with Kim all about the pelvic floor, and it is a must listen.
So I think the culture is kind of like, and it makes sense. Like, I want to preface this because a few months ago, I sat down with friends and we were having supper and I was really fired up. And I will fully admit, Nick and I were not in a great space. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to make supper for like harvest. I'm going to cook for harvest this year. And like the look, like all my friends were farmers, and the looks on their eyes got real big. And they said, well, you have to feed him. And I was like, okay, but can't he just like eat when he gets home? Like, and here's my deal. I have no mind like saying things and getting down a journey to be like, okay, I was wrong, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, let's just like talk about this for a second. Like, no one's asked me. No one's been like, hey, Erika, you're working 2 full-time jobs. Do you have the capacity to cook supper still? It is just, and not just cook supper, because I'm happy to cook supper because like I like cooking and I cook for my family, but now like pack up your kids and drive it to a field.
Well, it's expected, right?
It's expected, and nothing goes well when it's expected. Like, we just have to get that kind of out of our heads, in my opinion. Like, when you have expectations on people that have not been communicated or have not been invited, like, hey, like, I'm signing up for this. What does this look like? Blah, 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 right? And I think what was really happening in the side story is we were living in town. So I want you just to, for a second, and this is not... I'm sounding very ungrateful, but I just want to be honest about the journey. So at the time I was like, I have 3 little babies. I'm like packing them up.
Let's just remind people how old
they're little.
There's not a lot of time in between these kids. You had 3 kids under 4 at one point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm making supper, packing it up, driving it out somewhere, which is fine. And I was a stay-at-home mom, so that was fine. But then I'm like trying to explain to my kids, like, no, we can't stay at the farm. No, we can't go see dad. Like, it was exhausting for me. I struggled with it. I struggled with, the amount of times like I wouldn't eat because I was worried about getting the farmers their food and my kids their food. And I would get home and be like, okay, it's like late and I'm getting, and then we would have stayed for a combine ride to be with dad. And then all of a sudden I'm getting home and I'm like, I haven't eaten, but everyone else has. And so that was really hard for me. I started to just really resent it. And I really started to feel like I didn't ask to be a farmer and I wasn't asked if I wanted to be a part of this process. Obviously, I think there's certain things that happen when you get married, right? But I would say that in any life, like in any time, and Nick and I got married very quick and we didn't have those conversations, but like you have to let people know what's going on with you and what your life might look like and how things will go. And I will say this, in the beginning, I 100% think there's like this romantic, like again, oh, I'm taking my husband's supper. Like it's so romantic. And very quickly it's like, this is annoying.
Gets old.
Yeah, this is not cute. I'm not into this at all.
Yeah.
So went through a really big phase where I fought all the time for my identity. And I was so annoyed with, it was like just the constant conversation around it was about Nick and the farm. And it was like these older women who would be like they just couldn't fathom. Like it was like the conversations, I'm trying to think of like a conversation I would have had where it was like just so expected. There was just no asking. It was like, you married a farmer. Here's your responsibilities for this farm. And I'm like, no, like no one asked me if I wanted to be a farmer.
Well, what if at this time you worked full time and you had 3 kids and excuse me?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of farm. And here's the deal. I love the farm now. I love living on the farm. It's the best thing. Like it is the best. But I'm like, I say a lot on my social media. I love my farmer. It doesn't mean I have to love his job. Like I love my farmer. I'm so proud of my farmer. I watch him work the land. Like he feeds people. Like you ate today, you better thank a farmer. Like I'm very much on that. But I'm like, but it's not my path and it's not my dream. And I have farm friends and we talk all the time and are like, what would it be like to be married to a guy who could like, you could really count on all year. And it's not that we can't count on our spouses for financial support or emotional, but I'm like, they're gone.
Yeah.
Like this trip coming here was me not knowing his schedule and being like, I have to make sure I have childcare because I have no idea. Now, blessing, he could be with them because they all got sick. But this is farming. Farming, I believe, just comes with this massive baggage of expectations on females. And we've been talking about this with some other people, just like, and that's what I mean by old school is like, it hasn't changed. Like, I think that's just generational.
Yep.
Is like Nick saw, actually, I had this very interesting conversation with, I think my sister the other day. And we were like, we have this very interesting generational thing happening, which ties into farming, which is we were all raised by probably dads who told us we could do anything. And by parents who said we can do anything, right? Us females, you can do anything, go to school, be whoever you want. But our husbands were raised by women who did everything in the family.
Yes.
So they grew up watching their mom go from teaching to substitute teaching to help because of the farm. They watched their mom do all the meals for farming. But I was raised with, you can do it. You don't need a man. My dad literally was like, get a career so that if you don't have a man, you're fine. Like it was never like, you know what I mean? So that's like, isn't that such an honest difference that like me and Nick would have even grown up with?
It's so interesting too. Like, as you're saying, like there's this generational like shift happening in our house. Asher sees daddy do all the cooking and daddy do lots of the cleaning and daddy hold the house together.
Yeah.
Which is so great.
Yeah. So I think sometimes I'm like, there's this generational thing. And as much as my husband's a great supporter. Like, I'm starting a new business, and he's like, sound good. Like, he's never like, don't do that. Like, he fully believes in me. But I sometimes have to be like, I'm not this generation that you watched. Like, I'm not. Like, his grandma, they talked about it. CJ's grandma just recently passed away. But they were talking at the funeral about, like, grandma would, like, climb up the combine while the combine was running to bring supper to grandpa, and then drive the combine so grandpa could eat.
She was wild.
I mean, here's the thing. Props
Just
to
a
her.
moving, like...
Props to Ethel.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that that's not
Great name.
incredible, but that's what my husband would have seen. My husband would have seen my mother-in-law driving the grain truck if they needed.
Like, they literally didn't even stop the combine. Like, that's insane.
No, they were like,
you
we're
know?
going.
Like, this is what this person is doing, and you better, let's literally get on board.
Get on board and don't you dare trip, because if you do, you're squished.
You're in the combine now.
Like, seriously.
And we're not stopping it because we
Like, how is
not
that not
stopping.
a physical image of what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think I like didn't have a voice. I think I didn't know how to voice, and I think I was really angry. So I came out hot. Like, I came out being like, no, I'm not a farmer. I'm not a farmer. And in that, I built major resentment to this community, which is incredible. And so I think, I don't even know, as I'm talking about this, I'm like, I don't even know at what point I was like,
Like, it shifted?
yeah, like it shifted. I don't know. I mean,
Do you think it was a slow process?
yes, I think it was very slow. I think it was getting on better terms with my in-laws,
Yeah.
because so much of that was tied up there.
What, if you feel comfortable sharing, what did that look like?
I needed to learn,
The lingo?
probably, you know what? I'm happy to admit this. I probably needed to learn a little bit more respect, for people and how they lived and how, like, their opinions were. I had to learn to let go of things. I had to be like, there are certain areas I'm happy to let you, like, comment on. I have certain boundaries that I'm like, nope, that's one that we're not going to play with, kind of. I just had a thought and it just flew out of my... Okay, so I was going to say, I remember at one point we were doing succession planning, and I had to go to these succession meetings.
For somebody who doesn't know what that is, can you just...
Okay, so it's basically the plan that's in place for when, like, my in-laws want to, like, sell the farm and move the farm, because this is what happens. Okay, let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Like, as you
lots
hand
of
over the
people
farm
don't
to
know.
the
hand over
next
things.
generation.
So this
Okay.
is what can happen, okay? And farms are massive now. Ours is not, but farms are huge.
Yes.
Like, this is not the way, like, the small farm is a very, in my opinion, like, it's not as whatever. What a succession plan is basically the takeover.
Okay.
So what can happen typically if you don't have a succession plan is your farmer dad comes to you and is like, I want to be done farming. You have to buy the farm from me. Do you know how much a farm is? No
Oh.
one, like,
I cannot even
can't.
imagine.
no one's prepared for that.
Millions.
right? And so this is what happens is then people are like, well, I'm essentially screwed because now I've built into this farm with my dad, but I haven't owned it.
Yeah.
And now I have to pay. So a succession plan saves everyone. There's a plan in place
And
for
so
how
it's
we
like-
like slowly do this.
Okay, so Nick kind of slowly then would take ownership
Yes.
of a piece by piece by piece.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not like Rod walking out and being like, well, you have to buy the combine, you have to buy this, you have to buy that. It's literally like slowly.
Okay.
So anyways, so we started doing succession planning, and the guy who came in was great, but I was forced to go. I shouldn't say forced.
Say how you feel.
I went to these meetings begrudgingly. I didn't want to go. And so this is what I would say. Another piece for me is we would have to go around the table and say like our dreams for like he'd be like, I want to get to know you. Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And they would get to me and I'd be like, I don't want to talk about this because I was a mom. I had no identity. I'm like, my answer isn't on the farm. At that point, I didn't want to move to the farm.
Who was all in these meetings? I would
Like
feel
me-
so anxious.
Me, my husband, my in-laws. I think my sister-in-law happened to be at one. So I was very like, I don't want to answer this. And I would say that. I'd be like, I don't want to answer this. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, and he'd kind of pry and be like, what about this? And I'd be like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, leave me alone. So what ended up happening is one time when he was coming for a meeting, he was like, can I meet with you guys like first alone, like without the family? And we're like, sure. And he was like, I really came to talk to you. And he said this to me, and he said, he's like, the dynamic of being a daughter-in-law in a farm family is a very real like struggle. Like there are actually like people who do like studies in the egg industry on it. Cause they're like, you come in as the matriarch of your unit, but you are not like, mother-in-law will always hold a higher standard, and you're not allowed to have opinions, but you're also, and I say you're not allowed, this is again perceived, you're not allowed to really have opinions, but you are definitely supposed to show up with supper.
There's no space for your opinions, but there's a whole lot of expectation put on you.
Yeah, that's what I definitely perceived and I felt was my experience. So then, as this is all happening, I'm raising kids, I'm trying to manage the farm stuff. There were times when I was like, well, maybe I should like, how can I help my husband? Because that was also important to me. But he just also knew, he was like, you don't want to do this. Like, you don't. And so I was like doing different things. Like for a while, I was like a part of an MLM, like Stella and Dot selling jewelry. And then
I was like, what MLM?
Yeah, Stella and Dot. And then
how dare you?
I know. And then I became a lash artist. And then every other decision I was making, like about life, was about like, what will work for the farm? Every decision. Should I go back to school and be a substitute teacher because I could sub all winter while Nick is home, and then I wouldn't have to. And I'm not knocking that. I think that's brilliant if you're a teacher and you're a farm wife. Like I have a friend who does that, and I'm like, that's amazing. Good for you.
Yeah.
But that's what was happening, is all these decisions were being made based around the farm. And at some point, and again, I don't even know what happened. I'm sure there was a moment where I was like, maybe this isn't so bad. But eventually I think there was like a bit of coming to terms with like understanding that, yep, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I'm in it now.
So how can I make it?
And I can either fight. And you know what? I actually was given this advice once when we moved. I sat down with actually someone who's a farm wife and been a farm wife for a long time. And I was talking about moving to Waltham, and I didn't want to move to Waltham. And she said, when I moved to Waltham, she said, I had one thought in my head, and it was, I can either sit here and resist this inevitable thing for the next 5 years, and in 5 years wake up and realize, well, I should become a part of this community, and look back and realize I wasted 5 years. Or I can just come in and go, this is the life I'm going to be living. How do I make the best of it? And I think that advice has always stuck with me. So you don't even need to ask me now my best piece of advice, because that's probably it. But I think that advice has always rung in my head. Like, if I'm already here, how much energy am I putting into fighting it? So with that being said, I'm definitely more of like a happier farm wife now. I'm happy to say things like, we're farmers. I'm very proud of my husband. I'm extremely proud of the industry. I think finding my own identity in something else was a big piece of this.
Well, I'm curious to really hit on that piece actually,
Yes.
is like how you started to find your identity and what that journey really looked like for you, and looking back, where it started and where you're at now.
Yeah. So I would say actually, and this is a good question. I think I was always extremely concerned with bringing value to my family, and specifically, and I'm monetary value. Like, I did not value me being at home with the kids. I didn't think that was valuable in terms, like, I was like, I can't see it. I'm so visual, so I can't see it. Whereas I can see like dollars in the bank account. So I think what started to happen with my identity was, I started influencing, which forced me to really kind of like figure out who I was and where I held space and the things I liked and like what I was actually like interested in. Getting some independence gave me some identity, right? Like knowing I could do things started to help. So like lashing, running like even my small little lash business, which I did like in a salon and then out of my home, allowed me to be like, oh, I'm not just a mom or a farm wife. I'm a lash artist.
You had something
like,
that
I'm
was
a business owner.
Just yours.
Yes. I mean, I ran the Shack, right? And for years I didn't know. I remember it was like someone found out I owned the Shack and was like, oh, so you're like an entrepreneur. And I was like, what?
Which the Shack is an ice cream shack.
Yeah, which I sold. Listening. Yeah, I sold last year after 6 years.
Made bold business moves.
Because I make bold business moves. No, I sold it after 6 years, but I was like, oh, I had never thought of myself as anything other than like a wife mother or farm wife. And all of a sudden people were seeing things in me and they're like, oh, you're like a entrepreneur. Oh, you're like a business owner. And I was like, what does that mean?
What did you consider? Like when you made the choice to buy the shack, did you buy it or did you open it?
I opened it. Like I created it top to bottom.
Okay. So when you made that you're like, we need an ice cream shack.
Yes, I was
What
pregnant.
did you think you were doing other than like, were you just like fun little hobby or like, because you didn't identify as an entrepreneur? Like what did it mean to you?
I wanted ice cream.
I love you
I was
so
pregnant.
much.
I was pregnant. And I grew up in this town and I would always go get ice cream at like the gas station and they didn't have it anymore. And I saw a need in our community. I was like, there's nowhere to get ice cream. Like I used to love going to get ice cream at lunch with my friends or like in the evening as a family thing. So I started to like look into it and I was like, I really wanted to actually open a coffee shop. I really wanted a beautiful coffee shop, but there's already a coffee shop there and it's just like the town is so small. There's no room for that. And that's like way different financial game. And so I just like went for it. And what I wanted to do was provide a service to our town and provide jobs for teenagers so they could get their like foot in the game of business or work and have a resume.
Yeah.
Our town is very small. So to have a job that I felt was credible, to be like, you can like put me as a reference so that when you graduate and you go to apply at Sport Check or wherever, that you have someone that you're not just like, I mowed lawns or I babysat. Like it's like, nope, this is like a business. Like, so that was really my driving force, but I didn't think anything of it. Like I was like, I'm just going to do this thing and like, it's fine. I didn't like I think I didn't know what I was doing. Even with lashing, I had no idea that I was like running a business. I was just like,
Okay, well, this is an interesting conversation. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to rewind this and not take it in this direction. But I'm just sitting here thinking about labels, right? And I'm like sitting here and we're like entrepreneur, like mom, like lash artist, like whatever we're talking about. And I'm curious your guys' opinion on how much we just like place labels on ourselves. And, obviously there's labels where we identify more with them and ones where we don't and ones where we give pushback. But like, I'm sitting here thinking like, is it more profound to almost just, and I'm thinking out this thought, like it's not premeditated, so it's a little messy. But I'm like, how do we look at ourselves as just like us?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like CJ, Erika, Megan, like, yes, you are like a mom and an entrepreneur and like these types of things. And I think that we've talked maybe with someone else about this and like finding your identity and just finding your identity in yourself rather than in sort of like a label. And so I'm curious if that's a thought that you've had or what you guys think about that.
And or what you're doing, like, right? Like, no, that's your job. That's not who you are.
And a piece of you,
Yeah.
right? But like, we're all so much more than that.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Megan here. So something you guys may not know about me is I actually wear contacts daily, but as soon as I get home, I take those contacts out and I put my glasses on. I have had the same pair of glasses for a few years now, and when my prescription recently changed, I actually ordered the same frames again because I love them so much. I have the Dylan frames from Jimmy Mac Eyewear. They are black and gold because I love gold. And they are such a versatile style that actually 2 of my best friends also have the same frames. They look great on everyone, you guys. Jimmy Mac Eyewear is a local Canadian company based out of Regina that was founded on the belief that we should not have to struggle to find affordable eyewear, and we shouldn't have to settle for a style we don't love because of cost. When you shop with Jimmy Mac, you don't have to choose between cost and style because they offer a complete unisex collection at affordable prices. And when I say affordable, I mean it, because all of their eyewear packages start as low as $159 all in. You guys, this includes your choice of frame, your lenses, and all standard coatings. And you can choose from prescription or non-prescription polarized sunglasses as well. And you can also purchase all of their gorgeous frames with a blue light lens. So if you don't have to wear a prescription, you can still protect your eyes from your screens in style. You're going to want to head to Jimmy Mac Eyewear on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. That's JIMMYMAC Eyewear. And go ahead and shop all of the great styles on jimmymac.ca. We're going to link all of this in the show notes for you, so you can go ahead and click there now too, friends.
I would say, so we actually interviewed Tammy Zadunik and she speaks about this. She speaks, and I'm going to be fully transparent. Like, I am a Christian and I come from a belief that like you were created like in the womb, and like God has a very, like, you come out as a whole human regardless of what you become. Like, that is who you are. And I actually wrote this down once. It was a thought I had, and I have like a notes app where when I have like my little ADHD moments in the car, I like write it down. So I wrote, anything above my own belief in myself is a bonus. So what I meant by that was like, I need to believe what I can about myself, and any other label is just like the sprinkle and cherries on top of my life. But I can be in life as myself and have a whole and complete beautiful experience. And being an entrepreneur and a mom and a wife is like the cherry on top of my being. It is not who I am. It is like this beautiful add-on to what I already am.
Yeah. Right. Like I'm just sitting here thinking like we exist and that's enough and that's okay.
That's absolutely enough. And I think that was my struggle, is not knowing to just exist in myself. And instead, not only was I like trying to figure out who I am, I was being told who I should be. And that was just a mess. And that just made me resent everything. So then I think when I started like influencing, I started to like discover myself a bit more, discover what I liked, saw opportunities, all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I'm like an entrepreneur. Like that's what I'm doing for business. Like that's cool. And so I just started to expand on that. And I think once and this is not and I'm not saying that I'm sitting here being like, I became a whole person and now I'm like everything else. No, like I still go through this. And I know like at that time, I think when I started to like bring income into the family and have more of a role that I could tell people like, I do this, it helped me love farming, because now I got to see farming as this beautiful thing my husband did. And I got to experience it from a lens of like, that's what my husband does. How cool, how great. How can I support him in his business? Because I had my own businesses that I wanted love and support in, and I wanted him to be curious, and I didn't want him to resent it. Now, obviously the business I'm in is completely new concepts to most people. So there wasn't this like expectation or anyone being like, oh, you're going to do this or not. But I think once finding my own thing that I loved and I enjoyed, it made me realize how much he loved and enjoyed what he was doing. And that maybe my attitude wasn't helping. Maybe I was being a bit of a wet blanket.
Sounds like you had a really big perspective shift.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. Right now I'm in a season like I'm busy. I mean, we all are. We're all in the same stuff, right? But like we're interviewing me. So I'm like, I'm busy. I'm running ragged. And it frustrates me immensely that it will be expected I cook supper. It absolutely frustrates me that there won't be a conversation. And this is something maybe Nick will listen to, or we can like have a conversation that I'm like, I need to be asked if I want to be involved with Harvest, because I go to events where I MC until 11 at night and I come home and I don't expect there to be supper ready for me. And I'm working a lot and I'm bringing in income, and I'm now in a place where I would say, you know, my husband and I are holding similar cards and responsibility. And so there's definitely a struggle of roles and responsibilities. Absolutely. That I can tell I'm going through another shift. I can tell I still love farming. I love the community. I love being a part of the community. I do not always love it. I do not love that my husband, I don't plan things with him for months of the year because I have no idea, but I'm very proud of him. I love living on the farm. I resisted that so hard. I did not want to live on the farm. I love it. It's been the best decision for our family. It's actually incredible. Plus I got Harvey. And I wasn't allowed to have a dog in town, so I like very much love Harvey. But now there's this shift of like, okay, well, mom is bringing in, you know, a wage that is impactful in our lives. So where's my support? What expectations do I have?
Yes, that's an interesting shift for everybody. Has there been any, not pushback, but like maybe resistance or like fumbling on like, you know, in between you and Nick when you started working quite a bit? Because you are extremely busy.
Yeah, so this is actually funny, and I just thought of this. So when our business took off, so we launched Carousel Media Management. Go check it out at Carousel Media Management.
We'll link it in the show notes.
When we started Carousel Media Management, it was in 2021. We launched it, and that was a year, the highest drought in history, like more than the Dirty 30s, the highest drought in history. in our province. And so we actually had, and I'm a big believer. I mean, like, God completely covered us, because we went from him being like, I don't know if I'm going to have a crop, to me making income.
Yep.
So we almost like had this really interesting role reversal. So he was doing things with the kids more. He was actually cooking. I was like, I'm hustling, I'm running, like I'm making this happen for me. And he was like so supportive. And we actually did 2 years of that. Where that was like very normal. Like he had days he cooked, I had days I cooked. Like felt very actually 50-50. But this last year, obviously we've had way better rain, which is obviously amazing. I'm so grateful for. But now, I went into this winter when we moved being like, my expectation was like, oh, you're still gonna be able to like this is still 50-50. And he's like, well, no, I'm kind of back to my regular hours. And so that's been a big pain point for us this winter. I won't sugarcoat that. That's been very difficult for us to navigate, to figure out like, well, now what?
Well, because you have only gotten busier.
Yes.
Well, both of them at
Yes.
this point, right? Like
At this
you
point,
and
yes.
like he was slower, right? And so now
Yeah.
so you're both busy.
And
And
not
you're both
only-
probably looking at each other, being like,
Well,
"Well,
who's
I don't
gonna-
have time, and you don't have time."
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you better start getting Nate in the kitchen.
Yeah. So I'm literally like, so for instance, he's busy with the farm, but then we moved to the farm, which meant we have more responsibilities with the farm. And I think we both kind of didn't anticipate, prep, think about what that would look like for us. And we kind of went into this winter. I mean, we moved twice, like that was chaotic.
Yeah.
And we did these renovations, which we really wanted to do. We probably should have chilled out on the renovations for a hot second, but you know me, I'm just like, let's go.
But now they're
it's our
done.
beautiful home and we love it. And we're
now
done.
it's done.
Yes. But definitely there's been like some serious, I think, like looking at each other and be like, who's going to give? And I think this is maybe where some of my pain point comes back, because I will say this, and I would say this to my husband. I've said it to him in many a times where I'm like, the unfortunate thing is that the farm will always come first, because the farm is on time limits and weather dependent. It will always come first. It doesn't matter. And that's hard. That's very hard to have a situation where, I have a meeting and all of a sudden I think he's going to be around and then the rain is coming. So he's got to go. And I love my husband. I'm not throwing shade at my husband, but he will walk out the door every time. Like he will. And that's a farmer. We always joke that like, oh, does your farmer's tractor turn off? Ours doesn't. It's amazing, right? We make jokes like this. And so I think like that's a very new reality for me that I didn't realize in the beginning, because I'm like, well, now I have commitments.
There's like no wiggle room.
No, there's no wiggle room. I
Which
genuinely,
then you're just like treading this thing with like no margin for error.
Yeah.
Like,
So, and I'm not trying to sit here and like rag on my husband, because I love him. I love that man. If you've been watching us for a while, I love him. My very sweet husband. I love him, but there's no wiggle room. And so now I think when I first did this episode in 2019, I had come to this like really beautiful, and I was just influencing at the time. Like I was like lash artist. Like I was in this very like, my baby, like Theo was little. Like it was this very like, I love being a farm wife. I'm so like, it's so great. And now we're going through another shift, which is mommy is very busy.
So how are you navigating that no wiggle room right now? Or
I always will ask for help when I need it. I'm very, my kids are older. I have a 8-year-old, almost 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So way easier for me to like, be like, you guys are home today. I have meetings. This is what it will look like. Mm-hmm. Right. I plan. My schedule is no joke when it comes to childcare, when it comes to where can my kids be? What's my capacity? What can I do? Definitely in a season right now of learning what works for me. I mean, one way of handling no wiggle room is hiring employees and being like, I can't do all of this. Like I can't, I'm still a mom. And you know what? I want to say this. I don't want to work all the time. Mm-hmm. Like I want to be at home with my children. I want to be on the farm. Like I want to go for a combine ride with Nick, but I also have responsibilities as a business owner. So I think one way I'm navigating not feeling like, and again, I'm like, I need to clarify. There's like no wiggle room from like April to October. And then there's a lot of wiggle room.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a ton of wiggle room.
So we have a seasonal wiggle.
Yes.
But that's hard to wrap your mind around, even if you know it's coming, because you get used to one and you're just in a rhythm, and then the next one starts.
Yes.
And then you probably just get in a rhythm and then you flip back.
Like I tell people all the time, it is better for me from April to October to not to think Nick won't be there.
Yes.
Like I just assume he won't be there. And if he is, it's a beautiful bonus.
Yeah.
So I'm navigating that by delegating, by, we're only 2 years into our business, but like we're really mindful of like when do we schedule things and like what do we have capacity for. CJ knows my life, so she's like, hey, like Nick's in the combine, like what does this look like for you? And I think just being very intentional with our scheduling. I do work evenings sometimes when my kids are finally in bed. I'm like, okay, like I've got some time here. The house is quiet. Like I'm gonna work now. That's how I deal with the no wiggle room. And I think, like I said about that quote that someone said to me, it was like accepting that this is life and this is maybe that deep-rooted generational thing. And I'd love to talk to a farm wife who's literally like, no, my husband gets off the field whenever. I'm like, what? Like, I'd love to talk to that person.
Let's find the unicorn.
Yeah. So I think I'm like accepting that that's life, because you know what the other thing is? Nick needs to accept certain things about my life too. Like he needs to accept that I will just keep coming up with ideas and keep jumping into pools and learning to swim. And if he were to try to stop me, I'd be like, no. So for me to try to be like, he's come off the field twice. Once I was in a car accident. One time Nate was in an accident. That's when he comes off the field. Like he will. But anything else, he's like, you're okay. You're good. You've got this. Like I will be home.
I think there's a beautiful piece that you touched on of leaning into the acceptance. Doesn't mean you have to love it.
Well, and let's for a second,
it's like fighting gravity.
Well,
like, you know what I mean?
Here's the reality of it. I don't have to be a farm wife. We could get divorced if I really hated it. If I was sometimes I try to think about options, because like I don't like when people are like, I have no options. I'm like, there's always an option.
Always.
So I'm like, here's the deal. If I really hate his career, I really hate being a farm wife, there's actually an out, and it's to not be his wife. But do you want to know what? I really want to be his wife. And so it's like, so then I go, it's like step by step. It's like, okay, so you know those like in old magazines when it'd be like, yes or no, and then it would take you to a different answer.
I legit did one of those in my niece's magazine. I was like, oh my gosh, you have a magazine? What Taylor Swift am I?
Yes, literally.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, so the question is, do you want to be a farm wife? Which is, do you want to be married to Nick? Yes. So what does that look like? Because this is what his job looks like. This is how he's going to operate. He's a passionate man who does so much for our family, and he goes out and doesn't stop because of us. So I can either be like resentful or so grateful that I have a guy who cares. And with that being said, I then go, okay, so I can accept this. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Doesn't mean I have to like always be involved. Like I barely cooked for seeding this year. I was like, no, you're on the farm. Come on in. There's a meal here when you're here. Like, I didn't drive stuff out to him this year, which has been beautiful. And I'm excited to see how harvest goes. But I'm like, he has to accept things from me. Like he has to accept that I'm so outgoing and I want to like push and run and drive. And you know what? Nick is always joking about how much he would love if he could grow vegetables in our garden and I could go like sell it at a market. Cause he's like, you'd be so good at selling. Like that's what he would love from me. And I'm literally like, that's never gonna happen. Like, and he has to not accept, but like be like, okay. And I'm 100% a different person than he thought he was getting to. Right? Like, I don't think he had a clue what he was signing up for. Like, I think he was like...
It does go both ways,
It goes both ways. And I think marriage and relationships is understanding it goes both ways and then choosing if you want to stay in that both way relationship. And there are people who are like, nope, I'm out. And you know what? That's your choice. But I love Nick. I love Nick so much. And I'm very proud of my farmer. I love watching what he does. He would be a very miserable man if he wasn't a farmer, and that's not who I want. And so I think this big shift I'm in right now is finding support, finding balance, voicing when I need help from him, especially in the winter. And him being like, yep, I'm here in the winter, which means Erika has a bit more freedom to go. So that might mean in our business, pushing in the winter and resting in the spring and fall. And then, you know, having that cycle even in our own business and my own life, which is I push really hard here and I ease up here. And that's how our family dynamic works. So that's a whole long rant. I don't even know if we talked about like the farm journey or whatever, but I think the major takeaway is like, you know, be really clear about life and expectations. And it's actually not a good idea to have expectations on anybody, you know, communicate. I'm a huge advocate for like talking things out, which is funny because I married a very silent man.
He speaks in...
What is that? Someone said to me the other day, there's someone who, was that yesterday? It's like the silent person and the loud person. And then they get married.
The turtle.
The skunk and the turtle, they get married.
And I was like, what's the skunk doing?
Right?
Yes.
So
Spraying.
in my head, I'm like, I am very proud to now I'd be in a place to say we're farmers. I am proud of this community, but I do a whole lot of things and farming is the tip of the iceberg. I do not drive things. I did learn to drive the little green Farmall tractor, so I can like haul trees away and stuff now.
Cute.
Yeah, I learned to do that. I have no desire to sit in equipment. Like that's not for me at all.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be, and that's actually okay. And so I would love to see a shift in the farming community. If I could, this is a question I am asking myself.
This is like if you could have world peace, you know,
Yeah,
what would you
like
have?
what would I do?
Yeah. You could see a change in the farming community. What would it be?
Yeah, I think I would love to see, and maybe it'll start with our generation, is a bit more understanding. And again, I'm sure I'm going to have women be like, this isn't for everyone. This is my perspective.
Yes.
A bit more understanding that we all have careers and we all have jobs and different demands, and that farming is becoming more of a job than a lifestyle. I do think like the way I see my husband approach it is very business standpoint, which I see a lot of farmers doing, right? There's just so much more to it now. So I think I'd love to see just a shift in expectations and a shift of like identity, and that we can marry into a farm family and not have to be a farmer is like what I would really love to see. I would really love to see questions being asked, you know, I like, what if my desire was to drive the combine and instead I was put in the kitchen? Right? Like, what are we asking anyone who joins a farm family?
Well, because there's some women that want to step up and they want to be farmers.
Well, they want to be farmers. And I'm like, absolutely do it. Or I'm like, why? Like when someone joins a thing, it's like, first of all, do you want to join this endeavor? How do you want to join it? Like, how can we foster in you an ownership or in this community? And I think that's where I see some of these gender roles, I think traditionally sometimes still being in the same space. And I also want to say, I know a lot of women who love cooking for the farm. They love doing it. And I love following them because they give me all the inspiration. But it's for me, I would like for my own self to be asked, do you want to be involved?
Well, and I think that that's a good takeaway for anyone in our audience, right? No matter what stage of life they're in, right? Just being forced into something just doesn't feel nice, or expected or assumed to do something.
It will always breed resentment and pushback.
So how can we look at our own lives and be like, how can I invite people in more and ask, like, do you want to be a part of this? What would that look like if you're a part of this?
Well, it's what my dad said. He was like, you can sit down with someone and go over all the stuff that they suck at. And you know what? They're only just going to be like, not bad. Or you can look at their talents and their abilities and like lean into that. Yeah. So I'm like, whatever family business you're in, whatever industry you're in, I think family business is maybe what we're more talking about, but like asking what they want to be a part of, if they want to be a part of it, and not being offended when people don't want to be a part of it.
I think that's a big one too.
Because the offense for me is like, I feel like, and I'm very vocal, like I have no problem being like, I hate farming, or like today I hate it, whatever. But I think the idea that like for a while, it was like, if I said I didn't like being a farm wife, but I liked being Nick's wife, it was like, but Erika, the farm. And I'm like, I grew up in a town and then the city. I have no connection to this land, and that needs to be okay with you.
Yeah.
Like that does need to be okay.
Instead of it being forced upon you, what if it was just allowed to grow in you?
Well, and I said, I'm like, if you just, and I think I did remember saying at one point, if people just gave me frickin' space to learn the farm the way I needed to learn it, then I could do and probably fall in love with this, but it's like when someone's trying to shove something down your throat that they're like, I know you'll love this. Like, I know you will.
Literally.
I'm like, I'm going to resist it at all costs. So why don't you just give me time and space to learn it in my way, to see where I want to step up. Right. And yeah. So I don't know.
Applicable in like so many areas.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think that our community will really appreciate. They always love hearing you open up about your journey and your experiences. And especially this one, I think is really good. And you've left us with some really great takeaways.
Oh, I hope so.
Things to think about, you know, that apply to any industry, which is fantastic.
And relationships.
Yeah.
Yes.
And relationships.
Communicate, be open.
Yeah. So let's end on,
What should we end on?
what is your, okay, can we do both?
Yeah.
Tell me yes or no. What is your favorite thing about the farm right now and farming community, or, you know, anything like that? And what is your, and maybe you already kind of said this, but
Least
like
favorite?
your hardest pain point.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, I'll do hardest pain point first so people remember me being positive at the end.
Good
Hardest pain point is the assumption that I will cook. That is the hardest thing. Like I said, I was out for dinner with some friends whom I love very much. But we were having dinner and I just openly said, I don't think I'm going to, I think I actually said harvest. I was like, I don't know if I'll cook for harvest. And their eyes got real big. And one of my friends said, you have to do that. And I was like, I got kind of like bristly and I said, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
I was like, I need to be asked, or that will be a decision my husband and I do. Like that will be a fight between him and I. Right. I'm happy to make supper. My point was I'm happy to make supper and have him eat when he gets home, and he can pack a really big lunch. And my argument will always go to, my husband doesn't pack my lunch. My husband doesn't make me supper. Like, why is it only on me? Now there's different family dynamics where you're like, I do this, you do this, that works well, all good. So that's my least favorite thing, is the expectation that I will do supper. I would like to be asked to do supper. Nick. My favorite thing about the farm, so we moved to the farm and I resisted it for a really long time. I did not want to live there. I really didn't want to live in my in-laws' house. I was like, no, if we're going to live on a farm, I want to build somewhere else. But that took time, and it took me dreaming up what I would want to do with the house, which if you go to my Instagram, you can like see what we've done. But I think right now I didn't realize, and this is where I've grown again in this season, to appreciate my husband and understand him a little bit more. And this whole lifestyle comment that was made to me many years ago was, I park in a garage that's not connected to my home. So I have to walk out every morning if I'm going to the vehicle. And we moved in winter. And so, walking out in the winter, and it's like kind of dark, but the sun's coming up and everything was always pink. It was like always like this beautiful sunrise. I know. And I was like, I said to Nick one day, I said, I had no idea how I'd feel about the land. Like I had no idea I would walk out and be like, like, look at all this land, like everything the light touches, right? Like I was like, how beautiful, and this ownership over the land, and this ownership of like this, and so I didn't know that I would love the land. And that's been a different perspective for me, is to feel like this is the land my husband works, and this is like what we get from it, and look at what it does, and look at how it impacts the world. Like we have crops that go overseas, so that to me has been probably the best part, is getting to experience, because I'm sorry, if you look at farming, like if you were to list farming, I'm like, why do you want to do that? Like unreasonable hours. And like people are constantly mad at you for what you're doing to crops, or what you're not doing to your crops, or what you're doing to the land, or this or that. You're working these hours that are ridiculous. You're constantly getting more taxes.
Would you say it's a thankless job?
Yes, I absolutely. This is my opportunity to say it. I absolutely think farmers, for the most part, do not get thanked enough for their hard work, which is why I thank my farmer all the time. I'm very clear about how proud I am with him. If you go to my page, you will see this. But yeah, I think, it's a community that needs support. It needs understanding, which is my job as well as being in the community and being a wife, right? So, but yes, I think my biggest takeaway, like being I love the land. I see why my husband does what he does. That's why I got into this conversation about the list of things, because I don't think it's like a very appealing job. Honestly, that's my perspective. So being able to watch him work and watch the land and just feel the land is just like an experience that I think if you don't live on land like that, you don't understand. Right. So I guess I would leave it with that.
Thank you. Guys, if you are listening, obviously, if you're in, you had any takeaways, we really love to hear from you guys on our solo episodes. So get in our DMs, share, comment, whatever. But we would love to hear anything that resonated with you or things that you're taking away. We really like to build that connection with you guys. So thank you, Erika, for being so open with us today.
Yes, thank you. And everybody support our farmers.
Yes. Go thank a farmer.
Yeah.
Support them.
Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.
Bye.
Bye. Adios.